How are you? Jamie here from the JMT Mind Gym. Quick little video today about how to get the best out of our children, especially in relation to youth athletes or trying to get better results and outcomes with our schooling. And I want to speak to you a little bit today about the underlying psychological mechanisms behind motivation, behind what drives us, where our focus goes, where our energy goes, where our attention goes, where our intention goes, where our retention goes in relation to our youth. So something we do at the Mind Gym with all our clients, be it business owners, leaders, management, sports teams, groups, organizations, and athletes, is one of the very first things we do is we gain insight and determine what are that individual's values, what is most important to them, what is the highest priority to the individual, where do they need the least amount of external motivation or extrinsic motivation, meaning motivation from the outside, not the inside. And this is one of the very first things we do because it's important to understand what's truly motivating the individual. Now, if we look at this through the lens of our young people, our school-based individuals, from sort of 18 and below, every single human being on this planet has a unique set of values, a unique set of drivers, as individualized as your thumbprint, the retina of your eye, even like a snowflake. No two human beings are the same. Now, this is a real competitive advantage if we take the time to ask quality questions to find out what's important to an individual. And this could not be more useful and powerful when working with young ones. And I'll give you an example. Now, when we work with an individual and when we take the time to understand their values, quite often, and I'll give you a couple of actual cases where the young athlete, so we'll use a young AFL player and a young golfer. They've come into my office with their parents. We go through a process of finding out what's most important. Now, you could take a wild guess. Most young boys, teenage boys, have something in common. They love gaming, they love the online digital platforms, and a lot of them either have an Xbox, a PlayStation, or they're playing online on their computers. Now, very different to my age, sort of my generation, those of us in our late 30s, 40s, and 50s. That wasn't the case, but for these young ones, it very much is. Now, interestingly enough, when we dig a little deeper, we often find it's not the Xbox or the PlayStation that they value, it's what they're getting from it. It's the benefits, it's the opportunities, it's the advantages, it's how what they're getting from the Xbox or the PlayStation is actually fulfilling and enhancing their life. And I'll give you an example, and you can see how this could be very helpful if you take the time to understand this with your young ones. So a young client of mine comes in, he's one of the best golfers in Australia. And at this stage, he was 10 or 11. I think he was 11. And we went through a process of finding out what was important to him. Now, I would suggest if you've got a child, a son or a daughter, or you're a coach, you could try this with them. We're asking, for 10 to 20 things that are important to them in their life, to write that down in the context of their life. So this young individual, he got about 10, writes them down. And when we get those 10 things, we say, right, let's have a look. Let's see if we can break this down to the top 5. So we're looking for a hierarchy of 5. Bearing in mind this is conversational, will take sort of 15 to 20 minutes. Then they break down to the top 5. So this young individual, he's got kicking the footy, he's got Xboxes come up, PlayStations come up. I think there was something to do with, maybe it was like scouts or something like that had come up. So we've got a hierarchy of the top 5. Okay, the next process from there is we want to ascertain, we'll determine what are the top 3 most important things in this young one's life. Now, bearing in mind, my young client's parents are sitting there, and this is one of the best golfers, if not the best golfer in this country. And then we get it whittled down to the top 3. Now, golf was about number 4, something like that, of the most important. By the time we got the top 3, number 1 was the Xbox. Now, I could see the dissatisfaction starting to build on the parents' faces and in relation to their body language. And so this was interesting. Now, it was really important to preface the session, and especially if you're doing it as a coach with a young athlete and their parents, that this is not a reflection of how much they love their family or don't love their family or anything like that. It's just like what's important in their lives right now, today. So as we got further through to it, it turned out the Xbox was number 1. Now, the parents were struggling to understand why golf was number 4 and the Xbox was number 1. And what one needs to do is, when we've highlighted what's important to the individual, is to find out why. So the next question I continued to ask was, well, in the context of your life, why is the Xbox so important? Of which this young fella gave a few answers. It is a way to relax. It's some time out. Next question, why else is it so important in the context of your life? It's a chance to catch up with my friends. That's where we all meet. We're in a competition at the moment, blah, blah, blah. And beyond that, why else is it so important in your life? And we continue to get closer and closer and closer to the underlying drivers, the underlying psychological mechanisms of motivation as to why that Xbox was so important. Now, interestingly enough, it was all about connection with friends. That's where they'd meet. That's where they'd hang out. So it wasn't so much that the Xbox was the value, it's what was driving the behavior. Now, and deeper conversation with the parents, if you're willing to look a little further, us as adults, we have what's important to us. We have values, we have standards, we have high priorities. And actually unpacking what those are, one of mine is exercise. I love exercising. Now, exercise isn't the value, it's what I get from it. It's what's driving the behavior. And with that deep reflection, I could understand why exercise was so important to me. It wasn't about how I looked. It actually wasn't even about longevity. It was about other deeper underlying things. And our children are the same. Now, where the brilliance is, and what underpins the narrative of this video, is that if I want to get the best out of a kid, if I want to get the best out of a young athlete, I'm going to find out what they value, what's important to them, what's a high priority, and I am going to link, integrate, interweave, correlate outcomes and objectives to what's most important. Now, if you think about, I was talking about this AFL player who was absolute rock star, elite athlete in relation to AFL, but whilst this kid was high performing in AFL, he was low performing in math. So the parents were struggling to put all this support into this young man for the AFL in their mind, at the expense of his grades and academics. So what we did was we looked at AFL, and this kid also was on the Xbox and the PlayStation, playing an NRL game. He had some other, I think it was a basketball game that he really liked. We had linked that being good at mathematics would, one, help with angles, distance, percentages, timing, in relation to AFL. You know, when are the subs coming on and off? What is the angle of the kick? What's the angle of the tackle? Like, To have more context in his sport is going to make him a better AFL player. He's going to be more valuable to the team. He's going to be more reliable and dependable to the sport. And so taking time to first, what's most important to this kid? Because that's where their attention's going, that's where their energy's going, that's where they're organized, that's where they're ordered. You don't need to encourage a young athlete to get on the Xbox. They're already on it. And in fact, you turn a blind eye and go and look over there to empty the dishwasher, they're on the PlayStation. They're reliable, they're dependable, they're resilient, they're innovative, they're creative, they're adaptable, they've got a reservoir of energy for the Xbox. But if you can get that energy, if you can get that attention and intention and retention and link it and correlate to the outcomes and the objectives that you might want, be it better grades in math, better grades in science, more attendance at school. It's about taking the time to link the two. How does playing on the Xbox benefit mathematics? How does playing that basketball game and that NRL game benefit, enhance, complement, what's the positives in relation to mathematics? And let them find the links. When they find the links, when they're thinking, they're linking. Hebb's law states that neurons that fire together, they're going to wire together. So the correlation and the integration of what's most important. So first determine that, linking that and correlating that to the objective of the outcome creates more neural activity, myelination of the brain, and increases more priority and importance on said objective. So if you want to get the best out of your young ones, find out actually what's important to them, what do they value, what's the highest priority, and then link that with the objective. I hope this helps. Remember, it's not the Xbox that they love, it's what they get from the Xbox.